Sometimes, the strongest people are the ones we overlook, until a single moment reveals the depth of their courage. This is the story of a woman who wore scars and strength. Not in a battlefield, but in a small-town diner. You're watching Feel More, where real stories remind us of the kindness, courage, and quiet power that live in everyday people. Lena Brooks had never planned to end up in a dusty Montana town like Rustwood. At 28, she had already seen more than most people twice her age. As a Navy medic, Lena spent 6 intense years serving overseas, including a deployment in Syria where a rescue mission went sideways. The explosion that followed left her with deep scars across her cheek and neck, reminders of the lives she tried to save and the ones she couldn't. Coming home was supposed to be a fresh start, but reality hit hard. Job interviews ended the moment people saw her face. Strangers stared. Old friends drifted. After months of rejection, Lena took the only job she could find, waiting tables at Millie's Roadside Cafe, a no-frills diner off Highway 47, known more for its greasy burgers than its warm welcomes. She worked the early morning shift, when truckers, retirees, and the occasional family would roll in for breakfast. Most of the regulars kept their distance. Some whispered. Others avoided looking at her altogether. Still, Lena showed up every day, kept her head down, and did her job, because sometimes surviving means finding strength in the smallest routines. It was a cold, windy Saturday morning when things started to shift. Lena showed up to Millie's Cafe at 6 a.m. sharp, like she always did. The air outside was frosty, her breath visible as she unlocked the front door and flipped the "Open" sign. Inside, the diner smelled like coffee and bacon grease, comforting in its own odd way. She tied on her apron and began setting up, filling salt shakers, wiping down booths, checking the coffee pots. The routine kept her grounded. By 7 a.m. the usual crowd started trickling in, truckers in flannel jackets, elderly couples, a few hunters grabbing breakfast before heading out. Most avoided Lena's section if they could. Those who didn't often glanced away quickly, as if her scars were something contagious. Today felt no different, until it got worse. A young family walked in around 8:15. Mom, dad, and 2 kids, a girl around 6, and a teenage boy, maybe 15. Lena greeted them with a polite smile and led them to a booth by the window. As she handed them menus, the little girl blurted out loud enough for the whole diner to hear. "Mommy, what's wrong with her face?" Lena froze. The words hung in the air like smoke. The mother quickly hushed the girl, whispering something into her ear while avoiding Lena's gaze. Several heads turned. A couple of patrons snickered. One older man muttered, "That's why you don't hire people like that in the front." Lena's cheeks burned, but not from shame, from effort. It took everything she had not to react. She simply nodded, said, "I'll give you a minute to look over the menu," and walked away. Her hands trembled as she refilled a coffee pot. She could feel the weight of every stare, every whisper. Even Millie, the owner, seemed to shrink back behind the counter, pretending not to notice. As Lena returned to the family's table to take their order, something unexpected happened. The teenage boy, tall, quiet, with kind eyes, looked her straight in the face. No flinching. No awkwardness. Just calm, clear eye contact. And when he spoke, it wasn't to order food. "I know who you are," he said. "You're the medic who saved my dad's life." The diner went still. Lena blinked, unsure she heard him right. The boy turned to his father, who looked up in quiet recognition. The man nodded slowly and said, "You pulled me out after the blast. Syria. 2019, I never forgot your face." Suddenly, it wasn't Lena who was being stared at, it was him. The boy added, "People whisper about her like she's some freak. But she's a hero. You all just don't know it." No one said a word. Not yet. But in that small diner in Rustwood, something had cracked open, something bigger than Lena's scars. A truth had been spoken out loud, and no one could unhear it. The silence in the diner was thick, like the air right before a thunderstorm. Lena stood frozen, her notepad still in hand, as Ryan's words echoed in the small space. "You all just don't know it." The sound of clinking silverware stopped. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the jukebox in the corner seemed quieter, like it, too, was holding its breath. Lena looked over at the man she'd saved, Will Keller, and for the first time in years, she saw something other than pity or discomfort in someone's eyes. She saw gratitude. Respect. Recognition. Will slowly stood up, placing his hand gently on Lena's shoulder. "She dragged me out when the building collapsed. I had shrapnel in my leg and couldn't walk. She carried me through fire and chaos. I owe her my life." Someone near the counter whispered, "That's her." Another patron nodded slowly, murmuring, "I read about that mission." And then, like someone flipped a switch, the atmosphere began to shift. The older couple in the corner, who had once avoided her section, gestured for Lena to come over. "We'll take another coffee, sweetheart," the woman said gently, offering a soft smile. A man in a veteran's cap gave her a respectful nod and tapped 2 fingers to his forehead in a salute. One of the teenage busboys, who rarely spoke to her, walked over and said, "If you need help covering tables, I got you." Even Millie, who had always kept her distance, stepped out from behind the counter. Her eyes were glassy. "Lena," she said quietly, "why didn't you ever tell me?" Lena shrugged, unsure how to explain that heroes don't usually announce themselves. That sometimes, it's easier to let people think what they want than relive the trauma all over again. Ryan looked around the diner, clearly shaken by how people had treated her, and maybe by how long it had taken him to speak up. "She didn't come back broken," he said. "She came back brave. And you all treated her like she didn't belong." Those words hit hard. You could see it in the customers' faces, the guilt, the discomfort, the quiet reflection. For Lena, it was overwhelming. She wasn't used to being seen this way. She had grown so used to hiding in plain sight, letting the world move around her while she kept her head down. Now, for the first time in years, she felt visible. Not because of her scars, but because someone finally reminded the room of her story, and her worth. She excused herself for a moment and stepped out back, needing a breath of fresh air. The cold wind hit her face, but it felt different this time, like a reset. She exhaled, steadying herself. Back inside, people were waiting, not for their food, but for her. When Lena stepped back into the diner, the place didn't feel quite the same. She'd only been outside for a minute or two, but it was enough to gather herself, to breathe through the emotion, the surprise, and the sudden weight of being seen. She walked in expecting to find everything back to normal, maybe even colder than before. Instead, the diner was alive with something new. A different kind of energy. Tables that had been quiet were now buzzing with low conversation, not whispers or side glances, but honest talk. One of the regulars, Mr. Denton, an old rancher who used to avoid her section, stood up when she passed his table. "Didn't know," he said simply. "Wish I had. Welcome home, Lena." She gave him a small nod, still unsure of what to say. The words wouldn't come easily, not after so long being overlooked or pitied. At the counter, Millie was wiping down an already clean section, clearly avoiding eye contact. But when Lena passed behind her to grab fresh coffee, the older woman turned. "Lena," she started, then paused. "I haven't always been fair to you. I know that now. And I'm sorry." Lena blinked, surprised by the sincerity. Millie reached under the counter and pulled out a small framed photo. It was an old picture Lena had never seen before, taken from a local newspaper article someone had clipped years ago. It showed Lena in uniform, mid-rescue, carrying a wounded soldier over her shoulders. "I had this tucked away in the back office," Millie admitted. "Didn't even realize it was you. Figured maybe you should have it." Lena held the frame, silent for a moment. She hadn't seen that version of herself in a long time. The strength in the photo felt like someone she used to be, someone she was still trying to reconnect with. "Thank you," she said softly. Meanwhile, Ryan and his family finished their meal, but before they left, Ryan made one final gesture. He walked to the front of the diner, cleared his throat, and addressed the room again, not with anger, but with honesty. Sometimes, heroes don't wear capes. And they don't always look how we expect. But they're out here, sitting across from you, pouring your coffee, cleaning your table. My dad wouldn't be here if it weren't for her. I think it's time we stop looking at people's scars and start asking about their stories. He didn't wait for applause. He just picked up his coat, gave Lena a respectful nod, and walked out the door. The silence afterward wasn't awkward. It was thoughtful. And for the first time, Lena could feel the weight of judgment lifting, replaced with something unfamiliar, respect. She wasn't invisible anymore. And maybe, she never had been. In the days that followed, everything changed, quietly, but unmistakably. Lena continued working her shifts at Millie's cafe, but the atmosphere was different now. The same customers who once avoided her section now waited patiently to sit in it. They greeted her by name. They asked questions, not about her scars, but about her life, her service, her passions. It was as if Ryan's words had unlocked something in everyone, something they hadn't realized they'd buried: compassion. Millie, true to her word, made a genuine effort to change. She gave Lena more responsibility at the diner, but more than that, she gave her trust. "You run this place better than I ever could," she said one morning, handing Lena the keys to open up. Still, Lena knew something had shifted inside her too. For the first time in years, she felt ready for more than survival. Ready to live with purpose again. One morning, after her shift, she received a message from Rustwood's Veterans Resource Center. The center's director, Angela Hayes, had heard about Lena's story, thanks to Ryan's mom, who had posted a heartfelt note about it on a local community board that quickly went viral. Angela invited Lena in for coffee. What was supposed to be a casual meeting turned into something more. Angela explained that the center was expanding its outreach efforts. They needed someone who understood both military life and the challenges of coming home, someone who could connect with veterans on a real, human level. "We need someone like you, Lena," she said. "Would you consider joining us as a community communications coordinator?" Lena didn't answer right away. She stared out the office window for a long moment, watching the wind blow through the trees outside. She thought about the diner, about Millie, about the people who'd slowly begun to see her. But most of all, she thought about what it would mean to help others like her, people who'd come home feeling lost, invisible, broken. She turned back to Angela and nodded. "Yeah," she said, her voice steady. "I think I'm ready." That week, Lena gave her notice at Millie's. The goodbye was emotional, filled with hugs, thank you notes, and more than one teary eye. Millie hosted a small farewell breakfast in her honor, and even some of the toughest regulars showed up with cards and words of encouragement. Lena began her new role at the Veterans Center the following Monday. It wasn't just a job, it was a calling. She spent her days helping other veterans navigate civilian life, access resources, and find purpose beyond the uniform. And every Friday afternoon, Ryan and his family stopped by the center with baked goods for the team. Lena always made time for them, especially Ryan, who had unknowingly changed the course of her life with one simple act of courage. 3 months into her new role at the Veterans Resource Center, Lena had found something she never thought she'd feel again: belonging. Each day was filled with meaningful conversations, small victories, and difficult truths. Veterans came in with stories not so different from hers: loss, trauma, resilience. Some wore their scars on the outside, like Lena, others carried theirs deep inside. But they all needed someone who understood, and Lena became that someone. She helped them navigate paperwork, find housing, apply for benefits, but more importantly, she listened. Her own experience gave her credibility, but her empathy gave her connection. Word spread quickly in the veteran community: "Go talk to Lena. She gets it." Her office became a safe space, not just a desk and a chair, but a kind of sanctuary. She decorated the walls with photos of veterans from all branches, including a framed copy of the old newspaper photo Millie had given her. Right beneath it, she pinned a note that read, "Your story matters. You matter." And people believed it, because Lena did. Outside of work, Lena found herself slowly reconnecting with life. She started going to community events, even saying yes to invitations instead of hiding at home. One weekend, she volunteered to help organize Rustwood's upcoming Veterans Day assembly at the local high school. Angela suggested Lena give the keynote speech. Lena hesitated. "I'm not really the public speaking type," she laughed. Angela raised an eyebrow. "You've been speaking to hearts every day, Lena. This is just a microphone." It was Ryan who finally convinced her. When he heard about the assembly, he offered to introduce her. "People need to hear you, Lena," he said. "You helped my dad. You helped me. Now you can help them too." So she agreed. The night before the event, Lena stood in front of her mirror, adjusting a simple blazer over her blouse. Her scars were still there, but she no longer avoided her reflection. They weren't just reminders of what she'd been through, they were evidence that she'd survived it. The next morning, she stepped onto the stage of the high school auditorium as the lights dimmed and the students settled in. Ryan took the mic first. "She saved my dad's life," he told the crowd. "And then she showed me what courage really looks like. Not just on the battlefield, but right here at home." When Lena took the stage, the room was silent. She looked out at the faces, young, curious, unsure, and smiled gently. "I used to think scars were something to hide," she began. "But they're just part of our story. And stories, they deserve to be told." The silence in the high school auditorium hung heavy, but it wasn't the uncomfortable kind. It was reverent. Anticipatory. Every eye was fixed on Lena as she stood beneath the warm stage lights, her voice calm, yet unwavering. "I didn't come here today as a soldier," she said. "I came as a woman who's been broken, rebuilt, and still learning how to stand." She took a slow breath, glancing down at the students in the front row, some wide-eyed, some with arms crossed, unsure of how to receive someone like her. But she wasn't here to impress them. She was here to reach them. "There's this idea that courage only exists in the loud, the bold, the fearless," she continued. "But real courage? Sometimes it's just showing up. Getting out of bed when you don't want to. Facing people who don't understand you. Or forgiving yourself for the things you carry." She paused, letting her words land. "My scars used to define me. I thought they told the whole story, pain, loss, war. But they're just the introduction. The real story is what came after. It's rebuilding. Serving others. Finding purpose when I thought I had none." A student raised a hand timidly. "Were you scared when you came back?" Lena smiled softly. "Every day. But I did it anyway. That's what courage looks like sometimes, being afraid, and still stepping forward." Ryan stood proudly off to the side, watching her, shoulders back, chin up. And in that moment, Lena knew, he wasn't just proud of her. He believed in her. And she had earned every bit of it. As the assembly came to a close, the principal stepped up to thank Lena. But before the applause could begin, Ryan returned to the mic one last time. "I called her a hero once," he said. "And she is. But not just because she saved lives. She's a hero because she didn't give up when people gave up on her. Because she wears her truth, and doesn't let it dim her light." The room erupted in applause, genuine, loud, lasting. Students stood. Teachers wiped their eyes. Even the janitor in the back clapped with both hands, nodding with respect. Afterward, a line formed, students, teachers, veterans, parents, all wanting to shake Lena's hand, thank her, share their stories. She listened to each one with patience and warmth, never rushing anyone, offering words of encouragement and strength. That night, As she walked out of the auditorium under a sky filled with stars, Lena didn't feel like she was carrying the weight of her past anymore. She felt like she was walking into something new, a future defined not by what she'd been through, but by what she chose to do next. Lena's story wasn't just about war, or wounds, or what she had survived. It was about what we choose to see in others, and what we choose to become after life tests us. For a long time, the world only saw Lena's scars. They didn't see the woman behind them, the leader, the fighter, the person who kept showing up even when the world turned its back. But all it took was one voice, a teenager's simple act of truth and courage, to flip the entire narrative. Ryan didn't know he was going to change lives that day. He just knew something felt wrong. He saw someone being mistreated, someone who had given everything for others, and he chose to speak up. And in doing so, he gave everyone else permission to rethink, to reflect, and most importantly, to grow. That's the lesson. It's not always the grand gestures that make the difference. Sometimes it's a word, a gesture, a moment of kindness. And it doesn't have to come from someone older, or more powerful. It can come from a kid sitting in a booth at a diner. Empathy doesn't require perfection, it requires presence. Respect isn't earned by appearances, it's earned by how we rise after we fall. And courage? Courage looks like Lena. Not just in uniform. Not just dragging a soldier out of a burning building. But standing tall in a diner full of judgment. Wearing an apron. Carrying coffee. Holding her head high. Because sometimes, the strongest people are the ones you don't notice, until you finally look. Lena's journey reminds us that everyone carries a story. And before we judge, we should ask ourselves, do we really know what someone's been through? Are we looking at their face, or are we seeing their heart? At the end of the day, scars don't define a person, how they carry them does. And the choice to treat others with dignity, with compassion, with humanity, is always ours. So let Lena's story be a reminder. Courage doesn't always wear a uniform. Sometimes, it wears an apron. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that warm the soul.